All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to LaTip members. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes to join on. I know we kind of jumped a little fast the last time we actually got on. So I'm going to give you a minute or so just to get everybody acclimated to the Zoom platform and click on. Hope everybody's having a great day. We are going to give you some great information today, and I'm excited to be able to share it. So again, get yourself situated, get pen and paper, you probably need that. I think it'd be very helpful. And kind of give you a little rundown. My name is Frank, and I'm actually the president of LaTip in South Florida. And I want to thank Kim Marie and the leadership team at LaTip for allowing us to share this important information on this webinar today. We have tons of material we want to get to, so we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get started and jump right in. Now, as a business coach, I actually partnered with HPP Capital about a year ago to help my clients who had challenges with getting the capital they needed to grow their business. We've all encountered that in some form or another. And since the latest chaos and crisis that we've experienced and has affected so many small businesses, HPP Capital Services has shifted their focus to assisting business owners with understanding their options with the SBA loan process. So I'd like to introduce you to Amanda Pachaska, CEO of HPP, and Robert Kerrigan, to share with you the latest information on how this might be and how we might be of assistance. Amanda, Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Frank, for such a kind introduction and for the introduction to all of LaTip membership. We truly appreciate your support and generosity during this time. So as Frank said, I am Amanda Prochaska. I'm the CEO of HPP, and with us today is also Robert Kerrigan, who is our treasurer at HPP. And so while I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, we are happy that you joined us today. We understand that there's a lot of confusion out there about the different options you have at a federal level to get disaster loans. So we will be taking you through your options. We've also allocated about 30 minutes of this phone call just to answer your questions. You might be aware that you're currently on mute, so because we do that to control background noise, etc., but we do want to take any questions that you might have. You can use the Q&A functionality on the Zoom meeting, or you can use the chat function. We will be taking and answering questions from both. So with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Robert Kerrigan. He has been spending almost every single minute of his waking hours over the last month or so diving into these different options and following them along. They change actually quite a bit day over day, so I can only imagine how confusing that must be for a business owner at this time. So he will be taking you through the content today and everything that we've learned over those last 4 weeks. So Robert, it's all yours.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Frank. Welcome to the webinar. As Amanda said and Frank alluded to, we wish we were meeting under different circumstances, but we are where we are, and I think things are getting slightly better. But before I hit the agenda, let me just give you a little bit more color on Frank's reference to HPP Capital Services. We know that small businesses, which can be as small as a few $100,000 of revenue and as much as 100 million of top line revenue, oftentimes have frustrating relationships with the banks. So what HPP Capital Services does is 3 or 4 very important things. First, we help you, the business owner, deal with the bank. And bankers speak a different language than most of us, and a language that HPP knows quite well. So we assist you in getting the capital you need for acquisitions, for the purchase of a owner-occupied building perhaps, or just commercial real estate, growth capital. That's really the business we're in. We get you, our first program is called Bank Ready. We get you bank ready. We get you ready to go to the bank, and we put your financials in a condition that allows the bank to lend. We do it under GAAP accounting rules. We don't do anything that is not proper and legal, but we do know how to present you in the most positive light. The second program is investor ready. And that means maybe you've gotten all the bank capital, the least expensive form of capital in the marketplace that you can get, and you still need money to grow, and you have scalability and need more capital. We get you investor ready. We know the investors you'd want to be in business with, who are looking for great operators like you, and don't really want to run anything, but they want to invest with operating returns. Operating returns are normally 15 to 25% versus market returns that'll be 5, 6, 7, 8% if you're lucky. So that's the second program. The third thing we do is we help businesses get more operationally efficient. So we start with your finances, and then we go to operations, and we make sure that you're operating with peak efficiency. We have a 3-day program, we have a 3-month program, we have a 6-month program. And these are programs you're probably going to want to be aware of when we come out of this current crisis, if you will. So that's what HPP does. We weren't born to help with these EIDL loans and with the PPP loans. We dove into that to be helpful. So with that having been said, let me tell you about the topics we'll cover today. We will give you a little bit of history on these programs, the loan programs from the SBA, because I think context is important. We'll talk about the economic injury disaster loan, what's referred to as EIDL. We'll talk about PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, give you some details on that. We'll talk about who qualifies, what we think you need to know, how we can help, and what we have done to be as helpful as we can. And then hopefully I'll finish all that up in roughly 20 to 25 minutes, and that'll leave us more than half of this hour to answer your questions. If you do ask a question, let me know whether you're talking about EIDL or PPP, because they're different, and sometimes you just are thinking it and don't say it. So say with regard to EIDL, or with regard to PPP, or with regard to the 1099 stuff that I'm sure will come up. So let me begin. This is the first time we've had a national crisis. Even 9/11 was, though it affected a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world, it was really New York centric. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, the earthquake in '94 in Los Angeles that I was part of, it was destruction in that part of the world. So it's always been sort of situational and, either very local or at least regional. This crisis is national. These programs, the EIDL program was originally intended to replace the uninsured portion of property damage. It was never really built to do what it's now doing. But here we are with a national economic, or I should say financial, if you will, crisis. And the program has now been tilted in that direction. This program is run by the SBA. Point 2, when you went to get your small business administration loan, and the reason the banks like to give you those is they come with a federal guarantee that is as much as half of the loan, and sometimes as much as 90%. In other words, if you were to default on the loan, never your intention, but if it happened, the bank gets reimbursed for half of their principal or more. So that's the reason you go through the banks. In this case, you're not going through the banks on EIDL. You are going direct to the SBA, and kind of a little known fact from what I can tell, they were so overwhelmed with the number of inquiries and applications that they retained Rocket Mortgage to really do the underwriting on these cases. That changed on March 28th when they were inundated with applications beyond their staffing and resources. And the truth is that the SBA produces guidelines for the banks under the SBA 7A program and the 504 and all that, but they don't really underwrite. They do check to see that the bank, they check occasionally to see that the bank is following those underwriting guidelines, but they don't really underwrite. So when they went to directly underwrite, they quickly figured out they didn't have the manpower, if you will, to do that. So that sort of all changed on the 28th. And then on the 27th, Congress approved the Paycheck Protection Program, what we'll refer to as PPP. And that was approved by the Senate on a Wednesday. The following Friday, the entire House ratified, and the president signed it that afternoon. And hence we have our two programs, EIDL and PPP. PPP formally launched, believe it or not, just about 10 days ago on the 3rd. The 3rd to what? The 3rd to the 7 would be the 10th, and we're on the 13th with 2 weekends in between. So this is brand new, and as the notes reflect here, the banks didn't get what we call guidance. Guidance or information, we'll refer to it as guidance, comes from the SBA, the Treasury, to the banks on how to run the program. Normally when something is new, they get 6 to 12 months to understand a new program. In this case, they got about 24 hours or less. So to the degree that this is a bit of a mess, it's an understandable mess, to say the very least. So let's talk about EIDL. Again, economic disaster, and this is really meant for your working capital to cover normal operating expenses and obligations. That's its purpose. The confusion here has been the $10,000. The $10,000 was meant to get in your hands quickly. We'll underline that word quickly for a minute. Some money to get to you and your employees. That portion of EIDL can be rolled into the PPP, but it was supposed to be out in 72 hours, and honest to goodness, I don't really know anybody who's gotten their EIDL money. I think that just fell under the weight of too little resource and too big a promise. Well-intentioned, but undeliverable. The assistance can be up to $2 million. I'm going to give you a little inside baseball here. We're hearing that they're going to cap it at 500,000. I don't know that to be true fully. Our sources are very reliable. They're government-based, but we're hearing they're going to cap it. And the reason they're going to cap it is they, in the original bill, there was $8.9 billion for EIDL, and they have over $100 billion of EIDL requests. So I think there is going to be some capping, frankly. It says here the terms are either 15 or 30 years on this loan. They are not doing 15-year amortizations anymore. They're just doing 30s. The interest rate is 3.75 if you're a for-profit, which most of you are, 2.75 for the nons. They're saying 3 to 4 weeks. I think it's taking longer than that, but I think the EIDL money is beginning to come out, and whether or not Congress will allocate more money, I think they're in discussions about that, and they're fighting in the House, and politics at work, I'm afraid. The SBA was underwriting these programs. Now it's Rocket Mortgage. Believe it or not, the formula on underwriting it, the amount of money you'll receive, we have an idea of that, but no one's been told the Rocket Mortgage formula. Our belief is it's around 25%. It could be less, and I doubt it's more, frankly. A couple of things here, just so you have numbers in your head. I do this in millions just because it's easy to divide and take percentages of a million. A 30-year loan at 3.75% interest for $1 million would cost about $4,500 per month per that million. Now, if you get a $100,000 loan, you can take 10% of my number and it'd be about $450 a month. If you have half that loan, half of 4550 would be 2250. So remember the number, 4,500 per million per month. And again, the EIDL part of this can be rolled into PPP. And the only reason you would do that is if it's payroll related. And I'll talk about that in a second. And if I forget to circle back to that point, Frank or Amanda, feel free to get me there. By the way, no payments in the first year. I saved the best part of this for last. This money is meant to help you stay in business during the toughest of times. And it's, except for that $10,000, it really wasn't directed at keeping your employees at work. That's what PPP is about. So did I miss anything, guys, on that section? Okay, great. Let's go to PPP. Before I start PPP, let me make one note from my notes here. I said the Senate and the House were in discussions about putting more money behind both PPP, frankly, and I believe EIDL. The bill that was on the table from the Republican side of the House was another $250 million, which would bring the PPP portion of this to about, what was it, a little under 600 million, as I recall. The EIDL I'm not as sure on, although I don't think they're going to just leave you in the cold. I think there's going to be more EIDL money. There's talk that the president will reach into the DoD budget, the Department of Defense budget, and grab some money for that to make up the 100 billion or more that EIDL is currently short. So a little bit on that. The other thing I want to explain is being in the queue. There's a difference between having your application processed and being in the queue. Most of the banks have you in the queue, and that means that you will be soon going to full application. So just because you filled out the bank's intake form doesn't mean you are in application. You're in the queue. Not bad to be in the queue, but just understand the difference. Let's talk PPP now. Up to $10 million in loan assistance, depending on your revenue and payroll. The formula is a calculation on your 2019 payroll times a monthly payroll times 2.5 times that number. If you had, after the calculation, and we have a worksheet that helps you with this if you retain us, if you get to that number and say it was 100,000, you're eligible for $2.5 million, excuse me, $250,000, 2.5 times 100,000. The interest rate is 1%, and this is a 2-year loan. Let me explain that. All of you have likely heard this is a free money loan. It is not. You get forgiveness if you follow the rules very carefully. Now, what are the rules? Well, there's a bunch of them, but let me give you the big one. If you spend 75% of the monies you receive through the PPP program, you will get forgiveness. That means that 25% of it can be used for a variety of other things. Mortgage interest on owner-occupied real estate, rents, utilities, interest on other debt you may have, those utilities being water, electrical, internet, phone, all those typical things, gas bills, all of that. 25% of that number can be used for those things. These applications go through your bank or any FDIC insured banking institution or some of the national non-bank lenders, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Payout times says 3 to 6 weeks. I think you're going to see PPP move a little quicker right now than that. I think you're going to start to see PPP money flow even this week and next, and I think a little bit of it has flowed already. You can apply up till June 30th or until the money runs out. That's the cause of so many people putting in applications so early in the process. Is the money going to run out? You know, I don't have any inside baseball on this. I can just tell you that I think our country will stand behind the PPP program because this is money for your employees, and keeping America going financially is very, very, very important. Finally, as I said before, the loan is forgivable under certain conditions. It is not automatic forgiveness. You have to apply for it. You have to supply documentation. And all of that is vitally, vitally important. Have I missed anything on PPP, guys? No. Let's move on. Who is eligible? Companies with under 500 employees that are not public, and it's 500 employees per location. Very important to know that. You may have 7 or 8 locations and 1,000 people. You're eligible as long as you're not public. The nonprofits we haven't found a nonprofit that isn't eligible at this point, so that's good. And then independent contractors under the 1099 rules can apply for up to $100,000 under PPP, and they would get a loan that's a little under $21,000. And, you know, near as we can tell, and believe it or not, we don't have guidance on this completely, that'll be a totally forgivable loan. And I don't know what proof you're going to have to provide that you gave it to yourself. Seems kind of redundant, but we'll see. Who can't apply? Number one, businesses who have defaulted on an SBA loan. If you bankrupted but not on an SBA loan, you are not automatically disqualified. It's worth applying. If you own 6 or 7 businesses, with the exception of the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the F&B industry, and I shouldn't even say food and beverage, it's really restaurants and hospitality, you can apply with all your locations. Not everybody else can do that. Funny too, like liquor stores are not considered hospitality. I don't know how more hospitable it gets than liquor stores for me. I always feel very welcome in there and usually in a good mood, but they don't fall under the common ownership rules. So you can only get one PPP loan. Now, I will tell you, some of our clients with multiple ownership have said, I don't care, I'm applying with everything I got. That is not our recommendation. That is not our call. We execute to your desire to do what you want to do with the program. So with all that having been said, let me get to some of the things that we think you need to know. So this is an interesting one. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. The lenders are not accountable for, will not be held responsible for reviewing your applications for accuracy. So there's no checkpoint there. You will be solely responsible for getting the facts right, whether it's going in or coming out on the forgiveness side. So interesting, just know that. And that's why we feel strongly that having somebody like HPP Capital Services involved sort of gives you some insurance that you'll at least improve your chances of doing things right. Lenders are paid on the PPP program, but not on EIDL. So they're not going to be telling you about EIDL. They have no interest in EIDL, frankly. Your better bankers will say you should probably apply for that too. Let's say you're an independent contractor who grossed $200,000 last year. 100 of it was expenses and 100 of it was net income. You should probably put in an EIDL app as well as your independent contractor app. The 100 of expenses that you would have minus your cost of goods sold at, let's say, 0 in service businesses, you might end up with 20 or 25,000 on the EIDL side. And on the other side, if you were maxed out at 100,000 on the 1099 side, you'd find yourself with $20,000. Now, just so I've been clear, if your 1099 income was 50,000 last year, you're going to get half that loan. So it's not that you're automatically at 100. Forgiveness is not fully clear under PPP. We have some rules, but I think there'll be more guidance that comes out. And look, we're in a crisis now, so everybody's going like this, move, move, move. But in a few months, 6 months, when you go to apply for forgiveness on the PPP side, my guess is there's going to be a fair amount more documentation in order to get forgiveness. We think advice like what I just gave the independent contractors to select the right program or programs is important. We do that. And here's the big one. Get the application right the first time. It's hard to make changes and they cause delay. We're not even sure what the process is. We talked to somebody last week who didn't return our services. They went over with me because somebody said, call these guys, they can at least verify what you've done. They applied for a $400,000 loan because they got the cost of goods sold calculation incorrect when they were entitled to 720. And my guess is they'll cause great delay by trying to fix that, which is what I told them. Finally, and then we'll be done, and we'll be done just about as I said we would. Let me tell you about what we do. First of all, we aligned ourselves with a very large non-bank national lender. Why did we do that? We believe they're far more efficient at making loans because they don't have traditional depository customers. They're not worried about what's going on in their lobbies and all that service business. All they do is make loans. They're SBA approved. They're one of the biggest providers of SBA loans in the country. They've done $25 billion in SBA lending in the last several years and close to 6,000 loans. So they know the SBA quite well. And we felt they were a great choice for a couple of reasons. One, they're not looking for your depository business. They're not saying move and we'll help you. You don't have to be their customer to apply like many of the banks. So we feel very strongly we've made a very, very strong and good choice here. And we'd recommend that you use them. Now, let me tell you how using them works. We will help you with EIDL and we will help you with PPP if you apply through our national non-bank lender. Why? Very plainly, very honestly, we get paid by the national non-bank lender to help you. If you want us to do EIDL just on its own, we charge $750. If you want us to do PPP and you're not going to use our lender, we charge $750 for that application. But we're trying to make it easy for you. I will tell you we're paid rather modestly by the banks to do this, but we want to be helpful to as many small businesses as we can. So if we help you with EIDL and PPP and you go through our national non-bank lender, you don't get a bill from us. We'll get paid for by the banks. And by the way, it doesn't come out of your pocket. The banks are paying us out of the monies they're receiving from the SBA. So good to know. We can go over that later if it makes sense. We can help you get things correct the first time. Here's the problem. You do an application once and maybe you get it right. We've done dozens and dozens of these at this point. We know how to get it exactly right. We work directly with the SBA. We're very close to them. We talk to the SBA literally 3-4 times a day because things are changing. Very important. While the form seems simple, we have 30 pages of guidance and regulations and stipulations behind these programs. About 30 pages each, by the way, EIDL and PPP. So while it seems simple, there are some things changing daily. For example, they're only doing 30-year amorts now. So if you didn't want to apply because you thought the payment would be too heavy at $7,300 per month per million, you might want to reconsider now that you know they're doing nothing but 30-year amortizations. And you know, we just learned that over the weekend, and I don't think that's widely known. We know how to gather all the information. I will tell you that we've been on the phone with some people who don't get it for 30, 60, 90 minutes and more because they don't have all the available information and didn't understand. For example, they need to know what year the business was established. They need to know their EIN number, which people don't really keep in their wallet. Some simple things like that that can just shut you down and throw you off the system. Where it's appropriate, we can have a discussion with our national non-bank lender about a complicated situation that appears not to qualify, but in fact really does. We put in a dozen restaurants under one restaurant group early in the process, and there was some complication to that, but we were able to have very direct dialogue. Our job, review and recommend, provide guidance. That's what we do. And finally, we improve your accuracy. We can't guarantee you'll get these loans. I think the underwriting is pretty liberal going in. Just going to be a question of whether it's liberal when you have to start to supply all this information. So we can help you with speed and accuracy. This is the business we've been in for a long time in terms of getting people loans. So we understand understanding process, and that's in fact what we're particularly good at. So with all that having been said, I think I was close to that 25-minute mark.
Yeah, you were very efficient today, Robert. Okay, so I'm going to unshare and we are going to open it up for questions. As I mentioned before, you can either use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality on the Zoom meeting to ask your questions. So I think we already have a couple of questions coming in, so let's get after it. And let me open up my chat screen so I can see if anyone chats. So someone asked, I thought the under 500 employees per location applied only to restaurants and hospitality locations.
Nope, applies to anybody at this point. You were originally correct, but then they liberalized when they got a lot of pushback from the small business community. You know, businesses with 600, 700, 800 people, but in 7 states or 7 locations within 1 state. So they did liberalize on that.
Okay. Meg asked, is Citibank participating in the PPP program? What do I do if my bank is not participating?
I don't, it's so funny. I've heard almost nothing about Citibank. I've heard about Chase, I've heard about Wells, Citibank, I've heard very little. My belief is they probably are, but I forget if it was them, Amanda, that actually had you had to fill in your gross revenues. And if you didn't meet some criteria, was that Chase or was that them?
That was Chase.
That was Chase. So here, let me say this. I think the big banks are struggling. They're not all that excited about this program. So if they don't, you can find a local lender who might be taking apps, but many of them aren't doing it except first for their customers, and then they may not get to anybody else. Let me make this point, then I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. You're going to already have figured it out. Most of the banks have allotted a certain amount of capital to do this. So I've heard some of the bigger banks say, hey, we're out of money. No, they said the SBA is out of money. And the reality is they had an allocation, 50, 100, 200, 500 million, whatever it may have been, and they went through. The SBA is plenty upset when they're getting blamed because they know more money's coming through. What you can do very simply is you can apply for us, through us. We don't need your deposit accounts. We're not going to charge you anything. It's pretty straightforward. So that's the solution. It's probably a better solution, since you now know us, than trying to find a local bank that'll do this. First of all, most of them aren't answering their phones. Most of them are so inundated with emails, they're not getting back to you quickly. You call us today, we'll have this thing done probably today or tomorrow. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Okay. All right, we have one coming in from Curtis. I was trying to have one of my staff fill all of this out and navigate through all of this. It sounds like you can do it all and help us.
We really can. Here's the thing. We're not any smarter than anybody else. We've just done so many of these. We know the answers to all the questions. We know what they're looking for. And listen, your staff will be very frustrated with some of this stuff. Getting the cost of goods, there's only two numbers on the EIDL app. And one is pretty straightforward, although we've seen people make mistakes with that one. But the second one, cost of goods sold, has a little bit different definition depending on the industry you're in. And, we can tell you, include that, don't include that. So yes, we can be very helpful. You do PPP with us, no matter what the size, we do not charge you. And we'll help you with your EIDL application too. So, listen, this sounds so self-serving, but we're good people to know. We'll do it right. We'll help you. We care. We're not a big bank. This isn't our business, but we made it our business to help you. Frankly, it's not all that profitable for us, but we figure we're going to make some friends and we're going to do some good, and not everything can be about money,
Yep. So I just wanted to say, Blake, I got your message. If you could drop, well, I'll look you up and we'll get back to you on your particular question. He had a question.
Yep.
But I just want to acknowledge that we received it. Yep. So let's go over to the chat here. If you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor applying for PPP, how do you demonstrate that you're using it for payroll purposes if there are no other employees?
Okay, so good question, and it's one of those things. Once you hear the answer, it'll be obvious to you. But I understand why you're asking the question. So let's start from the top. I'm going to make an example. You're a sole proprietor who grossed $150,000 last year. You had about $75,000 of expenses, and you kept $75,000. On the $75,000 that were expenses, I would be recommending that you apply for EIDL. And you would likely find yourself with perhaps $15,000 or $20,000 on the EIDL program if you do it correctly. On the PPP program, you don't have to demonstrate that you paid it to yourself. Now, I think your question is likely that you're either a W-2 employee or you're 1099ing yourself. You'll probably have to supply your 1099 as proof that you did it and you would do that, or a tax return. There is some way you can prove that. So you would be applying for both of them. And in applying for both of them, you're likely to find yourself with some money on both.
Right.
You can use the PPP application to do that, and you can use the EIDL application to do that.
So Philip had a follow-on question. Would a sole prop owner or independent contractor use a monthly average compensation for the last 12 months and pay him or herself in that order to qualify for the forgiveness of the loan?
That's correct. So let's take the top example at 100,000. That'd be 83, 33, 34 a month. And if you do that, and we'll just do it right here in front of you, if you were at the top, 83, 33.34, entered times 2.5, there is a little less than $20,000. It's actually $20,833.35. Now, if you were half of that amount because you were 50,000, you would be eligible for about a $10,000 loan. So yes, you've got the formula correct.
Okay. Speaking of formulas, Vega Coffee asked, thanks for the webinar, first of all, any more details on how the SBA calculates the max dollar amount available on the EIDL loan?
Okay, so they hired Rocket Mortgage on March 28th. And to the best of our knowledge, they've never explained that. They got broad guidelines, we believe, from the SBA, and then came up with a formula. We think the formula is, let me get this right, 2019 gross revenues minus cost of goods sold equals a number. So let's imagine it was $250,000 of gross income, 100 of cost of goods sold. That would leave 150,000. We think the highest formula you're going to see is about 25%. In that example, it'd be 37.5. So that's the formula we think they have. Believe it or not, they haven't disclosed it to the SBA. They haven't disclosed it, and it's such a rush. There's a formula in there somewhere, but most of what we've seen has been at the 25% level of that remainder number.
Right, and just to your earlier comments, Robert, we're hearing from some that it might cap out at 500,000.
Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but we think our sources are reliable, and they said, you know, it's all in flux, it's all in motion, but we think that's where it's going to cap out. Let me tell you, we've had a number over 2 million at the max. So there's going to be some disappointed people, believe me. And, you know, it is what it is. They're trying to do the best they can.
Yeah. So we have a question about our non-bank lender.
Yes.
The comment was, some non-bank lenders are like working with someone from the wild, wild west.
Yeah, some of them are.
I would rather not deal with those who are. Can you name your preferred lenders?
Say the part, I missed the last part of the question.
Can you give a little bit more information and or name the preferred lender?
We do if you retain us, otherwise we're not spreading the name all over. Let me just tell you, they're the leading one in the country. Their CEO we know personally. He's been in Washington, D.C. most of the last few weeks helping the country do this correctly in the banking institutions, but we don't do business particularly with the wild, wild west, but I understand what you're saying, and I wouldn't take issue with it. Some of the non-bank lenders are not very professional, but let me just say this. Some of the banks we deal with aren't very professional either and don't get things done. So, but I can assure you our loans are getting done. And
right.
We have some inside preference, I think, because we do this so correctly.
Mm-hmm. And I will just say that the non-bank lender that we're working with, they were in the SBA game before all of this happened. And
that's right.
That was a main part of the main reason why we went with them, is that they know the SBA better than most.
They're, by the way, they're highly thought of by the SBA. This is the founder and CEO we're dealing with.
Yep. Okay. So Curtis asks, does it matter if you're an SCorp or a sole proprietor? My bookkeeper has been trying to complete the paperwork, keeps on saying the paperwork only is stating it's for sole proprietor. Is this for corporations too?
Yeah, the paperwork is sort of the paperwork. You strike the box, SCorp, LLC, sole prop. I'm assuming that you are the sole employee here, just from the questions I'm getting. I could be wrong about that, but it's pretty straightforward to apply. You just want to make sure you get the numbers right, the first time. So, we can help. We can work with your bookkeeper and make this a lot simpler for him or her.
Yeah.
Again, here's the thing. You do something once, you may get it right. Maybe, we took so much precaution on the first ones that we did because we couldn't afford to be wrong. I mean, we want to be right, but there's a lot of sloppiness in this, and I hope it doesn't come back to haunt people when they don't get the loan forgiveness that they were hoping for. By the way, we have a vault that we ask you to download all your materials in so that in 6 months you're not looking at your controller, who may be the new controller because the old one took another job, going, how did we arrive at that number? Where did that number come from? And you small business people, some of you live out of a simple set of Quicken books, and some of you live out of bank statements. So you don't want to get this wrong and end up stuck with a $60,000 loan that's due 18 months after you didn't get loan forgiveness. So, and I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I hate when people do that. I'm just suggesting whether you do it with us or you do it, without us, do it right and make sure you pin this down. Don't be sloppy about this.
Okay, so let's see. Eric said, I am a single member LLC without any employees. I grossed around 150,000 last year. Are either of these programs worth applying for? I did fill out the EIDL app last week.
So yeah, they're both seemingly, you grossed 150, you probably had some amount of expenses. Wouldn't be unusual for you to have 20 or 30% of that number in expenses, marketing, and all the things you do to generate business, whatever they may be. So let's use another example. You have 150,000 of gross, you have 30,000 of expenses, you net at 120. On the 120, you'd be eligible for about $21,000 of PPP money. On the 30,000, you might be eligible for as much as $10,000 or so, depending on your cost of goods sold and all of that. So yes, I would apply for both programs. You're probably going to see 20 to 30,000, 20 to 32,000, something like that, based on my roughing out your expenses the way I did.
Okay. John asked, what is the best way to connect with you? So can I go through that really quickly, Robert?
Please do.
After this webinar, we will be reaching out to you all with an email. It explains a lot of the information that Robert described earlier about what we do and how we partner with our non-bank lender, and if you decide to go with your own bank, what the pricing might be. So you'll receive all of that from us, John, and we've even attached the engagement letter because I know a lot of you want to get this done in a very rapid pace. So if you want to go through with that and sign, you can. If you want to have a conversation, John, I'm not sure what your specifics are. You also can just simply respond to that email and saying, hey, can we chat for a little while? We're more than happy to do both. Okay, so let's go back.
Great questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions coming in. Okay.
Good stuff.
I think I want to make sure that, okay, Vega Coffee asked, any idea on how long the EIDL might take at this point to process?
It's a good question. So originally it was 2 to 3 weeks. Now 2 to 3 weeks has gone by on some of those EIDL applications, and people are beginning to get money. I think most of the EIDL applications you're going to get some amount of money in the next 2 weeks. I think a big target date is May 1st, and I think they're going to try to get a ton of money out by May 1st. Listen, this is, my opinions are informed by information, but they're not always definitive. For example, we were telling people, excuse me, I just got a call from the SBA, but I can wait. We were telling people last Thursday or the Thursday before EIDL started, April 3rd, we were telling people on the 2nd, based on what we heard, get your application in, because it was the current rules were you couldn't apply for both once PPP came out. We rushed everybody we had into EIDL. It seemed to be true until we got guidance the following Tuesday that you can apply for both of them. So things change, and not because we're not informed, but because things are changing. And then, you know, hopefully the same day or within a couple hours, we get the new information. But it's moving fast, and they're making it up as they go along back there. So.
Yeah. Yep. So we did get a comment. Could I use your help to organize for the $750 and then use my own lender?
Yes, you can. Yep. Yeah, you can. No problem with that.
Okay. All right. So let's see, going to Michael. I am a sole proprietor LLC and its sole employee. 2019 was my first year in business and I operated at a deficit. Can I still apply for the EIDL loan?
Yeah, you can, because it's gross revenues in 2019, not minus your expenses, but not minus your cost of goods sold. So you can apply, even though you had a loss. Now, you can also apply, assuming you have 1099s, you lost money because you had expenses obviously greater than your income, but you can still apply for PPP because they're not asking you for your expenses. They're asking you for your average income in 2019. And let's say you started in June. Do you divide by 12 or you divide by 6? Well, that's your call, but let's assume you divided by 6 and you had $27,000 of earnings or something. You could take your average monthly earnings and multiply it by 2.5. So you can still apply for both loans. We'll help you with that. It's not complicated, but you got to know what to do. And your assumption is because you lost money, you're not entitled to anything. That's not the way the programs are built. By the way, the EIDL program was originally built that way. And when Rocket got hold of it, they said, this is a giveaway. And I think they're getting paid on how much they give away. So they're making it a lot easier than it once was.
Francesca,
apply, my friend.
Yeah. Francesca asked, for the EIDL loan, can we be penalized for not being eligible? The hardest thing to understand is eligibility. I'm a new online business owner and pay business mentors and an assistant monthly. Profit was very low in my first year, but COVID is also not helping with the scaling this year as originally planned.
Again, it is not. So let's do EIDL for a second. Mm-hmm. The first EIDL number is average, excuse me, not average, it's overall 2019 revenue minus cost of goods sold. So let's imagine you did $70,000 or $80,000 of top line in the business and you lost $100,000. It's $70,000 minus cost of goods sold. Now, your cost of goods sold should not exceed your revenue. That's really not the way it works when you do the formula, because you're marking up cost of goods sold to get to a revenue number. So it would be inconceivable unless you just had such a big inventory of materials, of products, that you actually paid more for the products than you had in revenue. That's fairly inconceivable. So you can apply even though you weren't profitable.
Okay, so let me go here. Let's see. I think Vega Coffee also asked, does the amount of time change if you're looking for the full 2 million versus 500,000? I think it's the time frame to pay it off, the loan.
Oh, on EIDL.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're using one amortization schedule, and that is the 30 years. So if you got 2 million, which we're not sure is going to be flowing to anybody based on what we've heard, but if you got 2 million, it would be your $4,500 per million per month times 2 $1 million loans, or one $2 million loan. So it'd be $9,000 a month for the mere pleasure of 30 years.
Mm-hmm. So Matt asks, I have a payroll that is W-2 for 2 employees and 1099 for the other 2. Can I count payroll expenses for all 4 employees?
No, 1099s have to apply on their own. And by the way, I think I saw something flash across my screen. There are no prepayment penalties, which I may not have said on EIDL. There are no prepayments. So if for some reason you want to pay this loan off, you have no prepayment penalties at all.
Yeah, so going back to Matt's question, for the 2 1099s, they have to apply on their own. But he can apply for the 2 W-2 employees.
Yes, that's correct. You can apply in your wages number and your average monthly payroll. You can only include W-2s because the 1099s can apply on their own, and they want them to apply on their own.
So Vega Coffee clarified it's not the time to pay off, but rather the processing time to receive the loan. Does that change depending on the amount that you're looking for?
That's a good question. I don't believe so. I don't think it changes. It's just numbers and more math. But I think if there's any holdup at all, it's that they're establishing perhaps some caps on how much they're going to do. And where they originally said EIDL was up to 2 million. Again, this isn't absolutely the definitive, but you know, it came from someone we know well at the SBA who said, I think they're capping it at 500 to spread the money around. Some of you may have seen a quote in some articles that said they were just going to send everybody $15,000. And it was said by an SBA official who was later retracted the remark because, you know, if you're applying for 100 or 200 or $300,000, 15 grand ain't going to get you very far. It means it's a little bit more than the 10,000 that few have seen. So I think if there's a cap at all, I think it's a multi-$100,000 cap on that, which will cover most of it.
Yeah. Francesca asked, how would you know if or what would be forgiven at all? Would you not know until you're in the middle of the process?
Okay, so there'll be more guidance on forgiveness, but what we know right now is that you have to, if you fired your people or furloughed them, I know you didn't mean to fire them, you have to bring them back. So here's the way it works. You've got your 2019 payroll with a bunch of adjustments, and our worksheets show all that. Then you've got that number times 2.5. 1 month times 2.5 of your average 2019 adjusted payroll number based on these the formulas they have. So you get the money. Let's say that number is 250,000. Let's make it 200,000. Be easier for my example. You get that money on a Monday. From that Monday on, 8 weeks, you got to spend it all on employees. Let me say it a little differently. You got to spend all that you have to spend, which is 75% of that number. So if you got 200,000, you got to spend 75% of that, or $150,000 on employees. It's got to be the same number of employees, the same payroll, and it also, you can't have asked anybody to take more than, I think, a 25% pay cut.
Yes.
So the rules to get forgiveness are, you know, you got to know them. And one of the reasons we have you parking everything in our vault is so that we can help give you some direction on getting forgiveness. Now, I think you'll apply for forgiveness 6 months after you, it could be sooner than this, but no longer than 6 months after you got the money. Yeah. 75%. So look, in my $200,000 example, you got to pay out 150, 75% of 200, and 25%, the rest is that 50,000, mortgage interest on owner occupied real estate, rents, utilities, interest on other debt. Those are the big eligible categories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We actually had a customer ask us the other day, can I reduce my number of employees by half but just pay them more and still get forgiveness? And that's not how this works. There's multiple factors that go into it to be able to receive loan forgiveness.
So that reminds me of another good point, Amanda. So our restaurant owners and our retail business owners are saying, wait a minute, Suppose I get the money May 1st. I can't open. The state of Nevada, where we are, for example, doesn't allow you to open. So you mean to tell me I'm paying all these people to stay home or to come stand in the store and maybe I can get them to do a little stocking or cleaning or something, but I'm not open? Yes is the answer to that. You have to pay them. This is meant to help employees, whether you're open or not. And you can imagine our restaurant clients, which we have many, are saying, geez, I only need so many people for takeout. The fine dining places aren't really doing takeout. And there's only so much cleaning I can do with my 70 employees. And the truth of the matter is you have to pay them anyway.
Yep. Okay, so I've been holding on Curtis's question because it's an interesting one. So he went on the SBA's website, and there's actually 2 other loan types beside PPP and EIDL that are on the website. One of them is a bridge loan, and the other one is SBA debt relief that are listed on there. So do we have any information on those 2 programs?
I can't tell you I've looked at either one of those recently enough to claim any authority. We'll take a look at them. I don't know whether they're quick. I have a funny feeling they are longer term programs because all the resources in this thing, to the best of our knowledge, are focused on EIDL and PPP. So I'm not sure they're fast, and that, if you're looking for fast to receive money more quickly, I'm not sure those are your programs. We'll take a look at them, and we'll know who that is. We can write to you and tell you about it. But I've heard nothing about them, frankly. And the other thing is there are some state programs.
Yeah.
So I don't know if those may be state-based in wherever you are, but we'll look. But
Florida was a bridge loan.
Yeah, and they were very small loans from what I remember. I mean, I'm talking about $5,000 and $10,000 loans. Not to say they couldn't help. It's just a question of how quickly they process and whether or not you're eligible for them if you got EIDL or PPP money. We'd have to read those regs very carefully to see if you're eligible for those 2 programs and the 2 that, are national in scope.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. I believe we've gone through all of the questions.
Yep.
At this point, but I do have 2 questions that we've been asked on other phone calls while we're waiting for people to get in their last questions here. What type of implications does this have on taxes?
Okay, good question. So on the EIDL loans, the 3.75% interest if you're a for-profit and the 2.75 if you're a nonprofit, less so with a nonprofit, they are fully deductible on your taxes as any interest is. The good news on the second program, PPP, is when your loan is forgiven, there is no taxable event. Normally, if someone forgave $500,000 in debt, you would get a 1099 for that amount and then pay whatever your appropriate effective tax bracket was on that money. That is not the case with PPP. There is no negative tax consequence when that loan is forgiven. No taxable event on loan forgiveness.
Okay. All right, so we have another question coming in from Vega Coffee. Can we still work with you if we've already submitted our EIDL application?
Yeah, you can apply PPP with us. And while you're on the phone with us, you want to check out if you did it right, we'll be happy to comment. But yeah, you can do PPP with us. We don't have to do EIDL and PPP. Let me be really clear. So if you don't work with our non-bank lender, we charge $750 for PPP. We charge $750 for EIDL. It's not our preference, to be honest with you. We'd rather you go through our non-bank lender. And by the way, we make less money normally on that. But we know that money is, it's tight right now. So, and we're paid for, as I said, rather modestly by the bank. But we can do PPP and not charge you anything if you go through our national non-bank lender, which is what I'd recommend.
Yep. Okay, and I actually had a question come in from one of our current clients while we were on the phone that I thought was intriguing and I want to share with the group. So she asked, I was told by my Chamber of Commerce that if I did not receive a confirmation that my application was submitted for EIDL, that I should reapply. Can you confirm this?
Okay. If you applied for, shoot us the answer to this, but if you applied before March 28th, I have a different answer for you.
Yep.
So they're not sending any emails. When you finished, you got a number. And many people thought they were getting an email, so they didn't record the number, right? I don't know if that's the end of the world, but it would have been better to record the number, which we've told all our clients to do, because not a single email has reached anybody we know, in spite of the fact it says you will receive an email. Now, if you applied before March 28th, and the way you would know, if you go, oh, I don't remember the date, is you filled out a sheet that made you put your monthly revenues in 17, 18, and 19, those years. And then in 20, you had to fill out January through March, and you had to project April through December. If you remember doing that, you went in on the first application before Rocket Mortgage got involved here. If you filled that one out, I would fill out the new one, and we can help you with that. But if you filled it out after the 27th, and you remember just two numbers, gross revenue in 19 minus cost of goods sold, and then a bunch of other crap, with just those two numbers, you don't need to reapply.
Correct.
Because you didn't get an email doesn't mean they didn't get it. Yep. Do you remember the last screen seeing a number that likely started with 36 and was about 7 or 8 numbers? If you remember seeing a number, you're submitted. By the way, so do you get an email when you get your EIDL money? What happens? We think it just goes into your account. Now, it doesn't make complete sense because EIDL is a loan. So what are the closing documents? Our lender is very particular, because if you don't do things right, it can come back to haunt the bank, and it can come back to haunt you. So on EIDL, I don't know what the paperwork is. Yeah. It's very unclear. On PPP, there's going to be more paperwork because of loan forgiveness, and because the amount that isn't forgiven ends up being a loan that's due in inside 2 years, likely 18 months, because you won't apply for loan forgiveness for 6. So, but if you filled out a lot of numbers, you probably were in before Rocket Mortgage, and you should do another app.
Okay. Well, we could talk about this all day long.
Right.
But I think we're at the top of the hour. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know it's a very difficult time for everyone, and we want to be helpful in any way that we can. So whether you just take away information from this call, or you walk this path with us, we're happy either way, that we could just be of service to all of you today and bring Main Street USA back online as quickly as we can. So I also want to thank Frank for introducing us to LATIP and their membership, and Robert, as always, for your insights and expertise. Robert, if you have any closing words you want to.
Real quick, Bob, before you get started, Amanda, could you let us know, are you going to be doing any more of these webinars throughout the week?
Yes, we are going to be doing another one tomorrow at the same time, same place, and also Friday at the same time.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of closing comments. First of all of you who are members of LATIP, I would just compliment your leadership on taking enough care to get us involved and to do this. They're really trying to be helpful to you and to get you great information. And I will tell you, we've talked to a lot of organizations that didn't have a willingness for us to do a harmless, painless, information-filled webinar. Not everybody jumps on board. Some are just sitting on the sidelines hoping that their members or association people figure it out. Kudos to this organization, LATIP, for taking a proactive role, number one. Number two, so I think the country's, this is my personal opinion, but I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've been in business for over 40 years. I've owned a variety of businesses. I've had literally hundreds and at points thousands of employees. I've always been classified, with a couple of exceptions, as a small business. I think you're going to see the country begin to open up in May for very practical reasons. That is that the current economic environment is unsustainable. And the Democrats know it, the Republicans know it, governors know it, mayors know it, and most importantly, all of us know it. I think you're going to see things open up by mid-May. We may be masked and we may be gloved. For me, it'll make it much easier to rob banks. I will look like everybody else. Kidding. But I think we will begin to open up the economy by the middle of May. I think May and June are going to be very difficult. It'll be some ramping up. July and August will be better, but look for a booming economy. Get ready for a booming economy by September. I think you're going to see the stock market return to 30, maybe break 30. Unfortunately, we're going to see the national debt hit 30 billion. Impossible. I think we should send a portion of that bill to our friends in Asia, but we'll see how the government treats that one. But get ready for great things. And you know, one of the things I want to say to all of you, we really appreciate your time and your willingness to listen to us. And we know you're doing that out of self-interest. We all have it. It's a good thing. But perhaps we could help you with growth capital and efficiencies operationally and financially when things get to some degree of normal. And I think they will. So I hope you'll remember us. We'll certainly remember these tough times, but be optimistic. There's no better way to live life than being optimistic, because what are the choices here? Let's get it done. I think it'll work. So I wish you all the very best.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again. Have a great day, and you'll be seeing an email from us here later on today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.